everybody. I'm so glad you guys have joined us today for another meeting and hopefully some wonderful information. I'm really excited to learn from our guest speaker today. And we're just meeting, so this is really cool. I love how the internet works and connects people that you maybe never would have had the opportunity to meet otherwise, which is really awesome. So I just want to thank you for giving us your time today, and I hope you're ready to take some good notes and learn some things and be inspired and motivated. And we're just glad to have you here. So I'm Heather Hutchison, and I'm part of the leadership of our group. And to my left on my screen is...
Hi, I'm Shelly, and I am also part of the leadership of our group. I came on board after Heather founded our group, and I'm excited to be here. I'm super excited for our meeting today because we have a fantastic speaker. We're joined today by Leah Pardee, and she is a business coach for online entrepreneurs. She's also the host of a top 200 podcast called Candid Confidence, say that 7 times fast. And through her own entrepreneurship journey, which she will share with us here shortly, she realized that mindset and confidence is just a game changer in business. So we're very excited to hear from her. We're thrilled to have her join us today to talk specifically about how podcasts can level up your business, but just to also hear from her about how she grew her business and with her focus on mindset. And with that, I just want to say welcome to Leah Pardee.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, we're really glad you're here. That's awesome.
So excited.
I'm ready to learn. I got my notebook so I can take notes.
I guess a good place to start is we're all such a mixed group of female entrepreneurs and boss babes, and we all have our own journey to entrepreneurship. And so we would love to hear a little bit more about you and how you kind of came into your own business, maybe what some of your hurdles or successes were, and how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because I feel like I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. I feel like from a very young age. In college, I took some classes in entrepreneurship, and even getting my MBA a few years ago when I was in the corporate world, we used to pick a concentration, and none of the concentrations fit what I wanted to do. So I picked entrepreneurship, and it's so funny because I think a little part of me always kind of knew I would be on this path. So my journey with entrepreneurship, I'll kind of start with my career, I guess, after college. So I worked after college as an assistant manager in the housekeeping department at a hospital, an inner city hospital. Ended up getting into sales after that. And it was very quickly into sales that I started realizing the importance of confidence, and that was really what was setting apart the top sales reps from everybody else. It was like a sales environment with like an 80% turnover rate, lots of rejection, people just quitting left and right, and the people who were able to stick it out really were the ones who had some type of mindset work going on, whether they intended it or not, but they were the ones who were a little more confident, believed in themselves, believed they were going to succeed no matter what. So I ended up in that journey with sales. A couple years in, ended up as a sales manager. And so here I am teaching sales people who are going through all the same things I did. So tons of rejection, making phone calls all day long, getting hung up on, walking into businesses and asking for a meeting with the owner and getting rejected in front of everybody else in the building. So I was coaching these salespeople on how to overcome the self-doubt and how to stick it out and all of that. And I was on the sidelines in my spare time, really getting into some reading on mindset and personal development. But it wasn't until I picked up the book, The Secret, that I really dove into like the mindset, the deep mindset spirituality stuff. And so I kind of had an epiphany moment or an awakening, started realizing how much positivity, the power of positivity, all of that. And so I was studying, researching, and one day I thought I should start a blog and I should share what I'm learning with other people, especially women, allow them to become more confident in themselves. So I started a blog and, the social medias that went with it, just thinking it was a hobby. ended up learning about the wonderful world of online coaching. And I was like, what the heck is all this? At the time, I was 26, and I thought there's no one that would ever hire a 26-year-old life coach, but maybe when I'm like, in my mid 30s, early 40s, I'll be good enough to do this. But I knew it was like what I wanted to do. But I was diving in further. I was listening to the podcast. I was getting into the world of it, seeing that there's a lot of possibilities for doing this. It was a lot more realistic than I had initially thought. So I ended up going to life coaching school online, became a certified life coach, initially focusing on confidence. I was a confidence coach. And so I worked with many different types of people. I didn't really have a super specific niche at the time. And very early on, started working with some people who were entrepreneurs, who had, Instagram pages, and they were doing, network marketing and different things. And they wanted that confidence. They wanted the mindset work. They were scared to show up. So I started working with them, started realizing, wow, I love implementing the sales stuff because I'd worked in sales for the past 5 years, how I could combine that with the mindset work and really help these people. And that really became my passion, is helping women believe in themselves enough that they can start an online business or grow their existing business, quit their 9-to-5, live out their passion-filled life with flexibility and freedom that I was able to have. So somewhere along that journey, I started my podcast, Candid Confidence, which was a scary thing. I was terrified. I will admit that. I was starting a podcast about confidence and I was freaking terrified. But I learned that it was just the ego voice trying to keep me safe, and that everyone dealt with fear, right? So I'm learning these things. I start the podcast. I start focusing on entrepreneurs. I end up, being able to leave my 9-to-5. And now really what I do is I help new entrepreneurs or anyone who wants to, scale their business, start podcasts, do things like that. I help them to really hone in on that they're good enough and learn to love themselves and do the mindset work, and combine that with the strategies so that they can, implement the changes and create the life they want.
That's amazing. And I did want to kind of follow up because our group is female entrepreneurs. And in my consulting group, I have noticed that women tend to have a little bit more of an issue with finding that confidence than men maybe do, and was curious to see what your experience was with that as well.
Yeah, I definitely feel like women struggle more with confidence. It's funny. My husband and I were talking about comparisonitis on Instagram, and I was kind of explaining to him that I was working with some of my clients, and I experienced this myself. Scrolling on social media, for example, and seeing the filters and seeing the Photoshop, and my husband's kind of like doesn't really know what the heck I'm talking about, because while he's on social media, he's not quite seeing that side of it, because men aren't putting on filters to change the entire appearance of their face. So I think that's a newer way. But I think back to myself as like a preteen, and it was magazines, right? Magazines had women photoshopped, and that was like the big thing. So I don't think that women are innately born with less confidence, but I think some things about our society shape us that way, with subliminal messaging about body image and all these expectations of what we're supposed to be. And, little girls are taught to be perfect, and little boys are taught to be brave and rewarded for that. So yeah, I definitely see that a lot in our society, is a need for women to learn how to build their confidence.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed, in this journey, doing this even on my own, is, well, first of all, you're not the first coach or expert that we've spoken to who has said that this part of it is a huge part of making sure that you're successful, making sure that you take time to work on yourself, to make sure that you take care of yourself, that you really love yourself, that you are being authentic, that you're putting your authentic self out there. And I love that message keeps coming back. But the other piece that's encouraging to me, even as a female entrepreneur, that I think touches on what Shelly was saying, is that for myself, I get less, I don't get so many nicks in my confidence when I'm like scrolling through Instagram and seeing a lot of the filters and things like that. I mean, occasionally if I'm having a rough day, but I get more discouraged, feeling like, is there space for me, if that makes sense? And so what's been encouraging to me actually on some of the female entrepreneur pages that I'm a part of is it seems like there's 50 bazillion coaches. And I don't mean that in a bad way, like 50 bazillion coaches who are actually successful and making a difference and finding their tribe and their group and the people who need to hear what they have to say. And in kind of a side way, that has encouraged me in my path by realizing that it doesn't matter if other people are doing the same thing as you, as long as you're doing you through that piece, then that's what's going to bring you clientele. And that whether you meant that to be your message or not, it already has encouraged me. Like, I really appreciate that part of it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's funny because I often hear the opposite side of that, which is like, there's so many coaches already. But yeah, when we see that the online world is doing nothing but expanding, it's creating a lot of opportunities.
Absolutely.
There is for sure room for everybody. And you said it perfectly, like when we're being ourselves, that's what sets us apart.
Yeah. And that's something that I need to remind myself of, and so I get the comparison part you and your husband were talking about when I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody is already doing what I want to do and they're doing it better or whatever. But when I'm really honest, it's not that they're doing it better, they're doing it differently than I want to do it. So that's super encouraging to me. So I did want to ask you, if you think for every business that a podcast could be beneficial, like if we have women watching today who are thinking, yeah, that sounds great, but I'm making this up, but I sell cakes and can a podcast really work for me? What would your answer to them be as far as podcasts go?
I think that podcasts are one way to grow your audience. So if you have a business model that you can scale and that you desire to scale, podcasting would be beneficial. You could have there's podcasts about everything. Now, if it's something where it's a local business and it's not something you're wanting to scale on a national or global level, podcasting would maybe not be the best because you're going to reach people all over that might not be able to come to your, I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So a Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania restaurant, that might not be the absolute best avenue. But if it's something that you're scaling, if it's something online, whether it's a product, a service, absolutely. And I think the more niche specific something is, that can even be better. I'll just say, for example, like my husband's into fishing, and sometimes I say, why don't you start a fishing podcast? But really, any scalable business online would benefit from a podcast, I believe.
Really? So how did you, when you were getting started, like bring your niche into focus for yourself? Or did it happen like kind of by default? Like, did you start it thinking, I'm going after entrepreneurs? Or did you just start it by sharing your journey?
So initially I was really more into like confidence, which is still a big part of what I talk about. I think that's huge.
Sure.
But when I started my podcast, really that was the focus. Didn't talk about entrepreneurship very much. I shared my journey here and there, but it wasn't geared towards entrepreneurs until I, really started honing in on that as my niche for my clientele. But even still, because I have a large base of the podcast that's not entrepreneurs from previous. So I mix it up. I have guests and I do topics that are not related to entrepreneurship as well, which I think is one of the fun things about podcasting is you can talk about a lot of topics. I think that's one of the fun things.
That makes a lot of sense. I like that. What about you, Miss Shelley?
Well, I think that was really helpful because with our group, we obviously are currently centered around local business owners. So there has been a lot of interest in learning how to do a podcast, but I think that's really valuable. I am very much a focus where it'll pay off kind of person. So I think it's a really good comment that podcasting might not actually be helping someone move forward, but if they want to, there's obviously space for them. And if your husband starts a fishing podcast, my boyfriend will follow. So I will encourage him to do that for sure. One question that we had come up in the group was related to podcasting was, how viable is it to make podcasting an actual source of income versus using podcasts as a marketing or growth strategy or tool? So I wanted to see what your thoughts on that were. Can podcasting stand alone as an income source?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So with podcasting, I think that most people, when they think about monetizing their podcast, they're thinking about having sponsors and doing paid ads like we hear on a lot of bigger podcasts, right? And to get to the point where a sponsor is going to pay you to place an ad on your show, you have to have a lot of listeners, typically around maybe 5,000 or so downloads a month. Which is substantial. So that can take some time to get there. It really depends. It could take someone 2 months to get there. It could take someone else 6 months. It could take someone else a couple of years. It really depends on the size of that person's audience, how they're marketing it, what strategies they're using to grow it, all of that. But that's typically around the point when people are getting sponsors, and those sponsors at that level still are not going to be, an income source. Really, because there's so many podcasts and there's so many opportunities for sponsors, you have to have a show that has a lot of traction to have like a full-time income type of, sponsors in that way. But I think that the best thing to do is to, sell your own products and services. And if someone has a local business and they are interested in podcasting, and they have topics they want to share, I would say go for it and decide what you can sell in the podcast. Decide you can sell something online. You could become an affiliate for a product or service that you enjoy and get, a 30% commission on each time someone uses your unique code or your unique link from the show notes of the episode. So you can do different things like that. But I think sometimes people are thinking of a sponsor when it might be more beneficial, especially early on, to sell your own products and services. And that's a great way to have an additional revenue source separate from your local business if you had one.
That's really good. Yeah. And I think we've talked, I think a couple months ago, we had a speaker on creating freebies as kind of a sales funnel and then bringing people in and to kind of scale your offer. So I think podcasting would be a perfect way to bring people in and then kind of sell them from there. I did want to ask you if you could share a little bit about your podcast and tell everybody maybe how you have grown quickly. I don't know how long you've been doing it for, but then also how did you target an audience? Did you target an audience or did that kind of grow organically?
Yeah, so I've had the podcast a little over a year. To be honest, it did take off pretty quickly, and that's because of a couple different marketing strategies that I used. So one that I'll mention, which is totally up to the person making the podcast, but one thing that really helped me a lot was having the word confidence in the title. So people are searching for confidence podcasts, right? That's a common thing you would search, and it's going to pop up. So for people who have a name, they want to use their own name or something that doesn't describe the show, that's totally fine. You can still do amazing. But if you have something searchable in the title, that can help a lot. There's a lot of other things you can do with that. You can use key search terms in your episode titles, in your show notes. And then there's lots of different ways to market it. But I think one of the other things that helps a podcast stand out is confidence. I think being real and authentic, people really like that. I think people can tell when you're being yourself and being bold. And those are things that really make your show stand out. So yeah, that's probably what I would recommend in terms of some ways to grow quickly. What other ways can you grow quickly? I mean, just sharing on Instagram and Facebook, putting it into social media. Pinterest is a really good way to grow a podcast as well. So if you have a blog or your website or even just your podcast itself, you can pin it on Pinterest and get a lot of traction that way. So those are all like free marketing things you can do. In terms of targeting an audience, I mean, really, it's women ages 22 to maybe mid 40s is the typical listener who are interested in personal development, which is a very wide audience, actually. But since I've kind of narrowed it down to entrepreneurship a little bit, that's maybe helped. But yeah, that's what I would say.
That's all really, really good stuff. So the question I wanted to ask that kind of leads right into that is, I think sometimes there can be confusion with people about what technically a podcast would be, meaning is it solely always just audio, or can you consider it a podcast if you are, doing a video that then you're like kind of double dipping, you load it into YouTube, but you also are putting it on, various channels that podcasts are shared on. And within that also, this is a compound question. What did you do to just get started? I mean, most of us have at least a computer with obviously a microphone and a camera, but are there certain specific steps that you took or that you would recommend to get started? Just focus on audio, do both, all those things. You're the expert. We know nothing. Where do I begin?
Yeah, so typically like a podcast would be just audio, right? And it would be downloadable on iTunes and Spotify and things like that. But you're right, you can totally video record it and put it on YouTube. Sometimes I'll even do a live in my Facebook group and I'll record it on my podcast at the same time. So those are ways you can, bring it into multiple places and reuse the content. In terms of getting started, my biggest advice is just decide you're going to start and just go for it. It's not as complicated as you think. I bought a microphone and it was a $150 microphone, although there's ones that are less expensive that are great as well. The Snowball mic, a lot of my friends have that one and they love it. I think it's like $50 or something on Amazon. I use a service called Cast for my recording, editing, and publishing. And so that's a $10 a month fee. However, you can use Anchor, which is free, which I have a couple of friends who use Anchor and clients who use Anchor and love it. So it's definitely not anything crazy. You just plug into your computer, you record. One thing that I never did a lot was editing. I don't edit my podcast very much at all. Part of that's because my brand is about realness and I'm trying to show people authenticity and vulnerability, and so I don't edit out when I'm saying the word or when I stumble over my words. I'm not editing those things out. That can be extremely time consuming, although lots of people do that, and that's totally fine if that's what they choose to do. But if you don't want to over edit your podcast, it can take an hour a week to have a podcast episode come out. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. So I think people tend to think it's something much more involved and much more expensive and much more crazy. And really it doesn't have to be like that at all. And I think people should just start.
So with a lot of our members, we have a lot that have started their entrepreneur journey and committed to a business, and they deal with confidence in kind of what you just said, getting started with those scary things, being in front of video or starting a podcast. We also have a large portion of our group who have dreams of being an entrepreneur, but have not yet taken the step, or they have big dreams, but they don't know where to start. And I think it does kind of come down to a confidence or comfort level. So do you have any advice that you would maybe give to them on how to kind of get over those confidence hurdles?
Yeah, so I think that we have this idea that like we shouldn't be afraid. And we have this idea that, the fear that comes up, it means that we're not ready, or means that we're not good enough, or means that we're not qualified. The reality is every human is going to feel fear, especially when you're starting something new, no matter what. Like fear is part of human nature. So it's not that we need to get rid of fear or that fear means anything. It's just that we have to dance with the fear. We have to work alongside the fear. We have to feel the fear. and remind ourselves it's not the ultimate truth. Just because we have a thought or a feeling doesn't make it the ultimate truth. So for a lot of people, including myself, when I was starting, it was, why shouldn't I wait a little bit longer? Am I going to embarrass myself? What are my friends and family going to think? And, I'm starting the process of writing my first book, and I'm having all those same fears. But now I can feel those fears and feel the fears of, well, what if no one buys it? What if I'm just making a fool of myself? What if it's too hard? I can understand that, though, that's just my ego brain trying to keep me safe. And it doesn't mean anything about me. It doesn't mean that I'm not ready. So I have to just have the fear and move alongside of it. So I think understanding that can help people a lot, because I really think that people have the self-doubt, and they think it means they're not good enough and they should just not try because they're going to make a fool of themselves, when in reality it doesn't mean anything except that we're just a human.
That is so good.
Yeah, that's really good. It's something, and Shelly and I even talked about it today. And, I struggle with the fear of, like, I get started and I get going and then good things start happening. And then I get scared at that piece, like, oh my gosh, it's happening. I don't know what to do now that it's happening, which I didn't think would be an issue, but it really is. And she and I were just saying today that we have to continually remind ourselves. And one of the ways I do it is, I think there's lots of other people who are just, they're just doing it, and they're doing it way messier than I would think that I would want to start or put myself out into the world. And it's working. Like, what in the world am I waiting for? And so I think that's a good kind of mantra to remember, is that the fear is, it just is, and we can either, and the reality is, when I don't do it, when I get scared and then don't keep moving, then it's not that I'm wrestling with the fear anymore. Now I'm wrestling with the, like, sadness or disappointment that I didn't work harder, or the anxiety. I would rather push through that fear and kind of keep moving and get to the other side. So it's encouraging to hear, not that I want you to be fearful, but that we all wrestle with that, that we all struggle with, at all the stages, at the starting stage, at the, now it's starting to take off stage, and that's something that we have to contend with on a regular basis, and that it's normal. I think normalizing that is healthy, because then, I don't know, it just makes it easier to digest, I think, for lack of a better word. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I like that. I like that a lot, because I think that is something that a lot of us wrestle with, and as entrepreneurs, something that you said at the beginning, which is interesting. This isn't on our list of questions, but it sparked my brain, is you were saying, you were getting your master's, and you were, trying to hone in on what it was you wanted to do. And I think a lot of us who end up kind of in an entrepreneurial life have felt like we didn't quite fit in all the other spots, and it's not that we didn't quite fit because we aren't easy to work with, or because we weren't a good employee, or because we weren't, giving it our best. It's because there was something else for us to do. And so that's something to even, I think, recognize. I appreciate that you said that we often have a different journey, and knowing that, Shelly and I both, our desire is to leave our jobs, within this next year, to do what we're doing full time. And I think reminding ourselves of working through that fear. I would rather work through that fear than still be sitting in here, 5 years saying, well, I'm going to quit my job eventually, so it's just, that's good stuff. I know I'm babbling on, but I appreciate that. I think those words, which is why your podcast is doing so well, are things that we all maybe know deep down inside, but we need to continue to bring it up and hear ourselves say it and remind ourselves of that goodness. So I'm grateful to you. This is a good timing for me to be encouraged. So I'm thankful for that. So thank you for that. This is a technical question that kind of it's not a good segue at all. Apologize for that. It kind of jars off of the emotional piece. But because I haven't really gotten involved much with podcasts. I always mean to, but my default, just because I know it, is YouTube. And I don't, it's not even that I'm always watching it. I just, when I'm wanting to listen to certain things, I search it in YouTube and then have it playing when I'm in my room or in my car or whatever. But I know that there's so much good stuff out there with podcasts, and Shelly loves podcasts and shares a lot of nuggets often for me. But honestly, I can say as someone who really has no idea, when you're doing this, when you're launching your podcast, are you navigating it like does it kind of work like social media or like YouTube? Are you creating an account that you're now like engaging with other people's accounts and you're like kind of creating a network? Is that kind of how this works?
So podcasting is a little bit different. And I think this is what intimidates people. So podcasts, basically if you go on iTunes or Spotify or iHeartRadio or whatever you've got, the podcast is kind of like its own channel, almost like YouTube, but there's not interacting really. There's not like leaving comments. And it's not like so really anyone can have a podcast, but I think people don't think that. When you go on YouTube, you're kind of more aware, like, oh, anyone can have a YouTube, and some of these people are just random people. Podcasts seem to be people who have a platform and have an expertise and authority. So when we're listening to podcasts, I think we're seeing those people and we're thinking, oh, this person must be some type of guru, right? We kind of put them on a platform or a pedestal because of that. So it's a little bit different because I think people don't realize anyone can do it. I think people think you have a studio and you have all this equipment and all this craziness. So anyone can do it. But to be honest, I think that's why they're so beneficial to businesses, because it does kind of give you that authority. It does kind of position you in a way that you become an expert in whatever you're talking about in the podcast.
See, that was good because I did not know that. I haven't been intimidated thinking it was like maybe too much equipment. It feels foreign to me because I just haven't, and I've always have thought, there's all these people who I respect who listen to them. I think it's probably a good thing, but just haven't made the jump. And so if it doesn't have the comments and things like that for the interactions, then how do you gauge how do you gauge your interactions? Like if no one can like or comment, is it you have to specifically download someone's specific podcast episode in order for you to know that someone's listened to it, or how does that work?
Yeah, good question. So for example, on iTunes, which is maybe the biggest way to listen to them, I'm not sure about that though, you do download all the episodes. So then as a host of a podcast, you go onto your platform service that you use, like mine is called Cast, another common one is Anchor. You would log on and you can see your downloads. But other platforms like, I don't think it was Spotify. I don't think you actually download anything. So there's a lot of confusion with podcasting because you're not capturing all of the true downloads. And it's a little bit harder to measure. For example, you can't measure subscribers because there's too many ways to listen. So there's not a way to really measure subscribers. So kind of different. It's a weird thing because it's almost like if you had a YouTube channel, but it was put out onto all these different ways for someone to interact with it, it would be like that. So yeah, there's some missing information there for sure.
I actually kind of like that, to be honest. I think that you can become kind of hyper-focused on those insights and on, figuring out what's happening with your curves. And especially as a beginner, I think it can be discouraging if you hear continually like refreshing and looking at the numbers. And I avoid them sometimes on purpose just because I think it can maybe put unnecessary pressure on you, I would think. So this is encouraging me in a lot of ways because you can always tell yourself, well, maybe 5,000 people listened. I don't really know. And maybe they did. Maybe only 2 listened. You don't know. For the way my brain works, I think that's kind of cool. I appreciate knowing that because I had no idea. That's really neat.
Yeah, I think especially like on Instagram, it's very easy to get a little bit obsessive with the number of followers, the likes, all of that.
Sure.
that is a dangerous slope that I've went down many times of becoming really obsessed with it. And I just have to, every time I have to pull myself away from it and say, you know what, that's not what's important. You know, what's important is how I'm impacting people in their lives, and how I'm making money. And those things are not, none of that is dictated by the number of followers you have. So
No.
The one thing that you can do on a podcast is you can rate and you can leave a review. So that's one way that people sometimes gauge, you know, maybe sponsors might gauge how far along you are, is by looking at your number of ratings and reviews that you have.
Okay. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stop talking for a minute.
No, that's good.
I'm learning so much, so I'll let
I know. This is so good. And I think just to go back a couple minutes, like I think you're absolutely right about just there's this perception that podcasts offer a little bit more authority on subject matter. And it is funny because there's nothing really to dictate that other than this perception. Kind of like Instagram is known as kind of the younger social media, or TikTok is coming up. And so there's really not any rules against it. It's just kind of people's perception. So I think that's a really valuable statement, because if we have entrepreneurs who are trying to, you know, build their authority or expertise in an area, podcasting might be a better option for them to move into. So very much appreciate that. Well, I just want you to take all my money and just guide my life. But you are here to help, and you've been helping a lot of women. I am officially a follower of your Instagram, and we'll give all of that information out to our group. But we were going to ask you, so if somebody wanted to reach out and contact you, what kind of products or services do you have and offer them, and how would they find you on social media?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at candid.confidence. I have a Facebook group that's called Free and Fearless Spiritual Entrepreneurs. And those are probably the two most active areas on social media for me. Services I offer, so I primarily offer group coaching and one-to-one coaching. So groups are really powerful. Some of the things we talked about today, the confidence building, groups are great for that, because you can be in a very close-knit interactive group with other entrepreneurs and realize everyone has the same struggles and the same questions. So I think that's really powerful. So I love running small groups for that reason. And then I also do one-to-one coaching for people who really want to dive deep, do the subconscious mind work, to really break free from the self-doubt that's holding them back, build their authentic confidence, and then really hone in on their specific offerings and feel good about them and learn how to sell them. So I really combine marketing strategy with the mindset work for like some magic that can occur there.
That's amazing.
I super love that. Yeah.
Yes.
That's
and
right
we
up our
will,
alley.
so much so. And so we will have all of that information available for the members. And then one thing that we really like to end our interviews on, because we are a goal-focused group and we have our monthly meetings, and it's all about where we're going next. And we spend a lot of time strategizing and making sure that our next steps are really leading us to where we want to go. And you mentioned one thing a little bit earlier, and I follow your Instagram, so of course I know, but what's next for Candid Confidence, and where are you hoping to move into next?
So what's next? Well, I just started writing a book, but that won't be out for probably 2 years or so.
Yay!
Yeah, very, very excited. You know, I don't really have any other immediate plans, just to expand on my groups a little bit, continue growing everything. Nothing too crazy or too different right now. Really liking how things are going, and gonna just keep building on the way things have been, really.
That's amazing. And I am super excited about the book. I think everybody should have the experience of writing a book. Heather can speak a lot to that because she is a writer. But I think that's amazing. And you have so much knowledge to share and to help people. So I am thrilled and excited. And I will wait the 2 years to buy your book, I promise.
Love it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And we will again share all of your social, and we hope to have you back maybe closer to your book launch. That would be great.
That would be great.
Amazing.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I hope everybody, you know, like Shelly has said a couple of times, will make sure that all of your social stuff is posted, because you probably will have people reaching out to you, because you have a lot to share and a lot of wisdom, and it feels very authentic, and it just feels really good. I just have enjoyed our time together, and I can't wait for all of our ladies to get to participate and watch and listen and learn from you. So thank you for honoring us with your time. I really, really am grateful for that. So bye, ladies. Thank you for giving us your time. And we're so thankful, as always, that you're here. And we can't wait to read all of your comments, you know, down below in the comment section, and hear what you think about our guest today, because I think she was amazing. I got a lot out of this session, and I'm so excited that we were able to do this. So thank you for being here, and we will be in touch. Right, Miss Shelly?
Yes. Thank you, guys. Bye.